According to the cloud.
Good morning. Oh, hey, Tashira.
Hey Rick,
How are
We were
you?
just talking.
good. How are you?
Hey, I'm glad I got you on here. You need to give Rob, maybe you already saw this, everything with the corporation, your LLC, so that Nick can pay that out.
So should I just update the information that's on the Kell website, like the routing account
Whatever,
number?
however, but I mean, if you want to, if that's a separate entity, this is for the title things. But yeah, he needs all that information. Um, and then the proof that you're the owner of that LLC, whatever, so that we have all that,
Oh,
in order to pay all that. Okay.
okay. I'll email him that over shortly.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. So I'm glad I got you on, by yourself here. So perfect. Um, well, I was going to go over, we'll give it a little time. It's not even 10 yet,
We
but
are recording.
okay. But we'll wait. Let's wait a few minutes. I usually start at like 10:04 only because that's when people get their butts together. Get on. Get on when if they're gonna get on. Um, yeah, we're gonna go over the lease a little bit here.
Are you going to go over?
Say it again.
What I'm going
Yeah.
to do is I'm going to record this and then it's a little blurb of this. Like, here's what you missed from last week. So we'll get more and more interest.
Okay,
But
get
we'll
some
also
blurbs. Yeah.
have this on the Kale Huddle website as well. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
But this will
Yeah. Like
be
I said, we'll give it a few minutes here.
this will
So
be a topic because people, especially spring season, more people are getting the rentals and then they have the questions. So
yep.
very
And
good.
I have that new. Did you see that, Tim? That new rule you have to have. What was it? I saw it
I think I
yesterday,
saw.
Rob. Yeah. What was that request? It was for a. It's one new thing that's completely, and if you have these leases, like we just had one of our agents had a 2025 lease, and the problem was she didn't sign it till the 2026. So technically, we need the 2026 lease now, because it doesn't start until 2026. When she was negotiating, it was
Yeah.
2025, but she didn't sign it in 2025. And there are changes to the Chicago lease as long as it's in Chicago. And therefore, the question was, do I need the 2026 lease? Yeah. Yeah. If that's not when it's getting signed till, then yes. And there's that one, I got to look on there. It was something significant. Rob had adhered to it yesterday. It's a new thing I was reading through. I was trying to find it. It's in the TL, it's in the C.A.R. LTO. So many things. God, Chicago, Chicago leases. My God.
Do you want to share your screen? Or share
Um,
your screen? You want me to I can just share
yeah, let me.
my screen?
Do you
Hey,
have?
Renita, how are you?
Hello. Do you have? Let's see. I got. Hang on. Let me pull it up because I do have it here, and then I'll share my screen. Hold on. I had the lease up here. Hold on. Let's make sure I got the right page, so I'm on the right page, and then get you. Yeah, lease. Okay, let's share my screen. Yeah, I could do that with you, and then you'll. Okay, hold on.
So here, if you send it to me, I can share my screen, but I can't scroll
Okay,
through your lease.
okay. So, you want me to just send it to you? I'll just send it to you. All right, let's do that.
Just email it over to me. I'll
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
do it right now. Perfect.
Hold on.
Vernita, twice, 2 times in a week. What a pleasure.
To be here as
Nice
much
to
as
see you again.
possible.
No, come here. We do this. He does this every the second and fourth Thursdays of every month. So this is a
Okay.
recurring. Uh,
Yes.
so yes, stay tuned.
Thank
All right.
you.
So
And thank you to Shara
Sorry,
for
I'm kind of
texting
lagging.
me. That was amazing.
hang on here. I'm gonna
Yes,
fix
of
this here.
course.
All right. All
Just
right,
let me
here
know
comes
whenever you see.
Tim. It's coming. It's a big one. It's 38 pages of fun.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
Takes a little time to there it is, downloaded. I just sent it.
Perfect. Okay.
All right. All right. Then we should be able to start going in a minute here. Tim's gonna put up the lease. We'll talk about that. Um, it's brand new. We made a few changes here and there in there, as they always do. Did you get it yet?
Yeah, I got it. I'm pulling it up. Hold on one sec.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, everybody can see my screen. Can everybody see the lease now?
No.
Now you can.
Yes. Now we can. All right.
Make it big. Can everybody
Everybody got
see it?
that? All right. So, oh, it's only 37 pages. Well, this makes it 38 pages. Yeah. Yeah. It basically is. Okay. So basically, yeah, we'll get started right now. Okay. So basically, the first part of this um is all about information, she's making homes safer. Yeah, that's what this thing is about, domestic violence. That's the new thing. Okay, see, it starts right out. Okay, so that's the newest part of this lease that was not in there before. Okay, it wasn't in the 2025 and prior. Okay, so it talks under the Illinois Safe Homes Act. That's this new disclosure as a part of the lease that needs to be signed. Yeah, I'm glad they put it right, front and center. So what it's talking about is, you can lend your lease early, that you're leaving landlord before or within 3 days of permanently leaving, for example, by removing all of your belongings. If for whatever reason your tenant is feeling unsafe. Okay, so you terminate that type of lease by vacating. You can't just say, I feel unsafe, I'm not paying anymore. I mean, you need to do something about it. And that is get out. Okay. Because if you truly feel unsafe, something must be done, more than telling somebody. Okay. So, you're on imminent, you feel that you're an imminent threat of domestic violence or sexual violence. You could also end your lease by written notice and documentation because sexual violence occurred at your rental place within the last 60 days, or later. Um, so this is as you scroll down, they talk about it. Um, Scroll down a little bit there, Tim, and let's see, so here your landlord would be liable for damages of 2,000 reasonable attorney's fees if they disclose a prospective landlord, for the Safe Home Act or share of any information. So this newly needs to be signed as a part of the lease. So this is a part, as you see, a first part um, of the lease in the Chicago. So a lot of people ask us, "Oh, can my client landlord have their own lease?" The answer to that is no. Okay. These are mandated leases because there are so many things in here that are mandatory as a part, no lease that I know of has this. Okay. No other lease, there's Evanston lease is pretty extensive. Aurora has a pretty extensive lease. This is a first, and this is only the city of Chicago. So if you're doing a proper Chicago lease by anybody, if anybody has the 2025 lease, this isn't going to be in there. So it's not appropriate. Okay. So if you're representing a tenant, make sure you see this Safe Homes Act. Okay. If you don't, you don't have the right lease in Chicago. This is specific to Chicago. Okay. Not Cook County right now. It's only Chicago. Okay. So this is a brand new change. As of now, January 1st, this is mandatory. So to protect, your clients, make sure. And if you're on the landlord side, of course, if they say, "Oh, I got my own lease," no, not now. The only way they could have their own lease, I'll take that back, is to insert all of these separate addendums that are in there, which to me, at that point, why your own lease? There's just no reason. We hear that a lot from our agents. Oh, my guy, my landlord, he's been in this business a million years and he's got his own lease. Why? You know, this is way more, it actually probably helps him more. He or she helps them more from a landlord standpoint having this lease in Chicago than any other lease you could ever have. Okay. So, hey, Patricia, so get another on the line. So, anyway, that's the first newest addition to this Safe Homes Act. Make sure that you see that whatever side you're on, protecting your tenant and or your landlord, make sure that this is the lease that he's using. Because if you're using the 2026 lease, which is right in the car, by the way, if you're Main Street or NASBAR, this and you're doing leases in Chicago, you must use this lease. Okay? Must. There are no ways around this. Don't go pulling up a NASBAR lease. Don't go pulling up a Main Street lease. You can in the suburbs. And Evanston, I know, has a lease. So that one you'd have to do there. And like I said, Aurora, I know, has a lease. So when you get in, you need to find out in some of these places they have their own lease. Those are the only ones I know of, specifically by towns. Okay. So there may be more. If you guys know of them, please let me know. I don't know. I don't know, Tim. Do you know? Have you heard of any other ones by any chance? I don't know. I haven't heard any.
I think Evanston has their own lease.
Yeah, I said that. Evanston, Chicago, and
Okay.
Aurora.
Yes, Evanston has
Yeah.
their own lease. But I believe we've made, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm a Main Street member, do I have access to the car lease in Dot Loop?
Yes. You
Okay.
should have access to the car Chicago lease. Yes. I believe Rob did that. So, and if you don't see it for whatever reason, you need to give us a call. Give Tim a call, give you whatever.
We'll get it.
We'll get it to you. But I'm 95% certain it's in
I'm
there
positive.
because, yeah, and it should be. So, okay. So let's move on from this. This is the first part of this. This is the Safe Homes Act. You have this. So this is the brand new, spanking new. It all talks about domestic violence. So if within a couple of days you see this, you have 3 days, your tenant needs to get their stuff out of there to prove that this is what they're doing. Okay. So the landlord may still be able to evict you if they prove, you know, that, some of these other things were. So the actual burden of proof here is if you're going on this as the tenant, you need to move out and get your belongings out. Okay. All right. So this needs to be signed. Um, and there's no discrimination on this kind of stuff. This is all, you know, but you need to file a case. You need to go with the police. You need to do all of these things. Okay. All right. So that's the first part of this, and then stop your utilities and all this other stuff. Okay. Um, all right. Keep going on this. Okay. And then they have all these legal hotlines and things like that. So this is a very useful, fully encompassing part of the disclosure that deals with this Safe Homes Act. Okay. So brand spanking new and part of the Chicago lease. Okay. So there you go on that. Let's see what's the next part of this. What do we got there? We lost it. What happened to the rest of the lease? Tim, is the we got it's not sharing anymore.
Sorry, my screen just reloaded.
Yeah,
I'm pulling it back.
it went to you.
Go share.
Okay, we got Adrian, we got Latasha. Hello.
We go. Here we
Yeah, we're
are.
going over the Chicago lease
Everybody can
for
see it
those of
again.
you that just popped in. Yeah, it's not there yet, but it's coming. There we go. All right, so we went past yeah, go probably page 5-ish, I believe, something like that. Okay, yeah, keep going here. This is the beginning of
Okay, so
this.
here's where we left off.
Yes.
There we are.
Yeah.
There we are.
Okay, here we go. All right. So yeah. So here's the the main part of the the lease that you seen before. And what this one is, this just talks about, the beginning, the end date, all these things, the monthly rent, date of the lease preparation, security deposit, if held by the landlord, what the name of the financial institution, all that kind of stuff. Non-refundable move-in fees, they're still there, they're in the lease, so they can't exist. That is not, someone was asking me about a month ago, are those still, legal and all that kind of stuff? Well, yeah, they're still in here. They're talking about other ways to handle it. For now, yes. Okay. Uh, Pets permitted. It talks about that. Parking included in the lease space. So you should mention that. Storage, furnished. If yes, that you should put there. Rent shall include the following. Now, this is very important when you're filling out these leases. If it includes, water, electric, gas, and basic cable and those things, check it. If it doesn't, if the tenant is paying electric and gas, and what? Oh, I'm sorry, I got to turn that off. Sorry about that. Although it is one of our agents, should be on this. Anyway, uh, okay, and then also it tells the personal property, refrigerator, microwaves, and stuff like that. Be very careful when you're filling out this lease. If the landlord didn't fill it out, make sure you do, of what's there and what's not there. Okay. Like anything else, they should have filled it out properly with all the things that are there, what is included, what's not included, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But so then you got the tenant's property insurer. They're always going to need, some type of insurance there. So, that is where that goes in there. So identification of the tenant there, landlord or authorized management agent. Okay. So you have all of this information. This is very important for both sides. Okay. Make sure it's filled in. It's kind of like page 14 of the sales contract. Okay. Page 14 of the sales contract, all of that information, and it says required. Here it doesn't say required, but it kind of is. Okay. How else can the landlord get in touch with the tenant and vice versa? How else can the tenant get a hold of the landlord without this being filled out properly? Right? Emails, telephone numbers, and the name. If there's as a real estate licensee, you should put that in there. And other persons that are in the premises. These things should be stated here. If it's your wife, your girlfriend, if it's children, whatever, even if they're adult children, everything should be in there. Okay. That's the purpose of this. And then, of course, on all of these 18 pages, there's tenant acknowledgement here. Okay. So let's go to page 2 of these 18. So you got additional agreements and covenants. So now the good thing about this lease, one of the good things is all these disclosures are in here. Okay. So technically, you don't need separate disclosures. You started with that Safe Homes Act, which is brand new. Now you've got the lead based paint and radon disclosure. Okay, there they want separate documents on that. Okay, but they allude to it. So if the lead paste paint, base paint, if the building was built before 78, you're going to need it. No different than any other sale or anything else that you did. Radon is required regardless. Okay. Um, and it may be not applicable because if it was built after 78, you don't need the lead-based paint. Okay. Radon, okay, should be in there. Okay. And then they show radon testing guidelines pamphlet that's included in this, which we have to provide when we're doing a sale. Here it's already in this. Okay. They talk about, let's go up again, Tim, a little bit. Yeah, the heating cost disclosure. Okay, one thing that's a big deal in the Chicago lease is this heating cost disclosure. Okay, you need, and Tim is involved with these. You need to order these ASAP. Okay, and these should be ordered by the landlord, right, Tim?
Here, so hold on. So you're gonna actually go on to kalehuddle.com, type in heating disclosure, and it will pull up a link. You fill out that form, and it takes about a week or so, maybe even longer. It's all dependent upon
So
people's gas.
do it right away.
So do
Right.
it sooner rather than later. Okay.
Yes. And that will cover your heating cost disclosure because by law, that needs to be a part of this lease. So typically the landlord will do that. But if you want to be proactive, there's no problem with ordering it, as the tenant. Okay. But certainly by law, the landlord has to provide this. Okay. Okay. So notice of conditions affecting habit. I can't say it. Uh, Habitability. I can't pronounce it no matter what I do. So unknown, see attached, the landlord disclose any violation. So if you're aware of the porch or, something is not right, it's not, habitable for whatever reason, you need to acknowledge that as the landlord, and then see attached, put whatever isn't, and the tenant acknowledge. If unknown, nice, good, perfect. Okay. Um, so, you talk about, flood zones in the last 10 years, receipt of the following. So all these building code violations and any of these things, this is something that, yeah, see, there you have the heating cost disclosure. And then you've got the security deposit receipt, if that's applicable, condo
Greg, may I ask a
association rules.
question?
Yes,
So if you're renting a condo and the building has code violations, do you have to include the code violations for the building in the lease?
as the landlord,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
because they need to know that, because that, it's no different than, we just had, funny you asked that. Good question, Patricia, because we just had one of the cases, I can't get into specific that what that brought up in my um you know
Duties.
no. I sit on the board for you know
Oh.
bad things that happen. Um, so one of the cases came up where they did not disclose on a sales contract that there was a crack in the foundation, and there was. And they didn't because they thought because it was an HOA problem, not
Mm-hmm.
theirs, that they didn't have to disclose.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong. Okay. They needed to disclose. And then, furthermore, what this case entailed was we never, buyer, would have gone forward. And this is the same thing had we known that there was a crack in the foundation.
Of
So, what they
course.
wanted, they did an inspection, and they paid for an inspection. So essentially, they wanted their money back for the inspection because they wouldn't that there was improper disclosure on the deal,
Mm.
which would be the same thing here. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
see both sides of that, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't make it right because they still needed to disclose, even though it was an HOA issue. it's still their issue, because you need to disclose to everybody, tenant, buyer, whomever, that there's a foundational issue, right?
Okay, here's the second part of that question. So if you have a tenant in place with a lease or even a month-to-month lease, and something happens in the association that created this need to disclose, do you at that middle of the lease have to say, hey, dude, guess what's going on in the property? Do
Yes,
you have to disclose?
yes, you
Okay,
should. You
okay,
absolutely should disclose from a
good
landlord
deal.
perspective. Yes.
All right,
Um,
thank you.
mhm.
I'll call
Um,
him now.
yeah, right. It's an issue. So they should know, because God forbid something happens 6 months from now, they're still under
Mm-hmm,
lease. They had no knowledge of it, even though it happened in the middle of it. You know,
mm-hmm.
not good for you as a landlord or representation of a landlord, whatever. Yeah. Okay. So then you've got confirmation of no agency. If you're no agency, by the way, in my opinion, you should never be doing dual agency ever. Matter of fact, we don't do dual agency anymore, but especially in these, well, any case, because if you do no agency, let's say you represent the landlord, you don't have to answer anything that you want to be a bad person, but you don't represent the tenant. Once the lease is signed, you have no obligation to that tenant ever again, because you did no agency. Even though you helped them secure and did everything that rose to the level of what, kind of appeared to be dual agency, you did not represent. Okay. So it's a protection for you. Don't do dual agency. Represent one or the other and do no agency. Okay. Everywhere, whether it be leasing and or um, purchasing. Uh, so confirmation of dual agency. So if that did exist, that's where you have to do it. All right. Page 3. And then you got all your signatures and tenant stuff. So you got lease covenants and agreements. Okay, covenants of all the representations. Nothing to my knowledge has really changed much here. You should do a, to your point here, Patricia, tenant inspections, building code violations, things like that, should be addressed, and they should have been in a separate addendum if some of these things existed. If not, you're acknowledging that everything's okay. You got the bed bug thing here. That's a big deal. Make sure,
Question.
yes.
Sorry, I didn't want you to get too far away.
No, no,
So
go ahead.
when you own your own property and you lease it out, I just use a notice of no agency, a notice of, yeah, right?
If for the tenant, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
good deal.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Get that. Don't dual represent. Just say, yeah, hey,
No, I do notice of no
obviously
agency.
I represent me, the landlord. I am the landlord. I represent this property, and I have no agency relationship with you. Okay.
Okay,
I'd be happy to write the lease. Da, 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 I will tell you everything. You still have to, you know, be a realtor and a landlord, but you don't represent, which is great for you. Therefore, you don't owe them anything other than a lease, a proper lease, writing everything, doing everything right as a realtor would do, but you're not their representative for that property. Okay.
One more
Uh,
quick question regarding that
mhm.
notice stuff, because I own a condo and some situations just happened in the property. So how do I notify my tenant? Does it need to be in writing, maybe just an email, or do I need to do a
An
new
email is in
lease?
writing, and that's perfectly
Okay, okay,
fine. Yeah.
good deal.
Yeah.
All right,
Just
thank
say
you.
it has now come to our attention that as the building just came to me that there is a crack in the foundation. It should not impact your unit in any way or whatever, but
Mm-hmm,
here
mm-hmm.
is your notice. Period. End of story.
Okay,
Don't
good
get too
deal.
lengthy, whatever, but kind of tell them what you know.
Right,
Here's what I know.
okay,
You're on the third floor, shouldn't really have a big impact, but this is what's happening. End of story.
okay,
Yeah. Don't
thank
get
you.
too involved. Um, So shared housing, Airbnb, they talk about all this stuff. If it's allowed, if it's not allowed, housing units, keep going down, Tim. It's okay. Regarding bed bugs. So, there's a whole thing with these bed bugs. They got returned bank items here when they're talking about if the tenant obligation under for insufficient funds, all of these things are in the lease here. And which to me, once again, having your own lease, why? Everything is covered in the Chicago lease that could ever be like ever. Okay. It's very onerous to the landlord side. I'm sorry, to the tenant side, but the stuff is in here, and Illinois is more of a tenant state than the landlord. This lease has everything in here, all the things that are required. So and it's they have to do these things. You got possession, security deposits, subleases, assignments. It talks about each and every one of these things. So if you ever need to refer, it's there. And then you have to tenant acknowledgement, there. The right of access, it gets into this. So make sure you follow these rules. 2 business days. Everybody gets into this stuff. I got another case that, happened, where, they're talking about didn't give it access. But in here, it says that you give them 2 days, take photos and marketing, with the intent for marketing. It says it right in this lease in Chicago, which I like that it says that. I can't get too deep into this, but something happened like that, and it was interesting. But it's right in this lease. Okay, they have the right to come in here, the landlord and or representative, to do that. Okay, they talk about holdovers. Yeah, you can go month to month after that. Heat and
Question.
water. Yeah, go ahead.
If you are doing a month-to-month tenancy, do you have to have an actual legal lease, or is it assumed that a person has a holdover or a 30-day month-to-month? You know what I'm saying?
Once the lease is technically over, so let's say it
Uh-huh.
ended 12/31, 2025.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If they are continuing, quote unquote, holdover, um,
Mm-hmm.
that is an automatic. If they're paying rent and you're allowing them to stay in there, then
Mm-hmm.
that's assumed at that point on a 30-day basis. Every
It's
30 days.
assumed. Okay. Okay.
It is assumed. Okay. Now, to formalize, which I would recommend highly, because if you continue to accept rent, that is giving them the right to stay there. And if at some point you just say, hey, I want you out,
Mm-hmm.
you need at least 30 days, whatever that period is that you're allowing them to stay. 30
Mm-hmm.
days, 30 days, 30 days. So they get at least 30-day notice. So just always remember that,
Okay.
whatever it is.
So you
The
don't need a
lease may
written
say
lease.
differently, but the lease is no longer in place. So
Right.
now it's
Okay.
the 30 days.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
my suggestion always is to formalize, only because weird things happen when you don't, okay, or have possibility of happening. Let's just put it that way. When it's not written, okay. So just be careful with that. I understand. Well, give them another lease, and if they don't accept it, then you make your decision. Okay, I'll let you go 30 days in this, but I am looking for a tenant for this, so expect people to be coming in and out of here, and you will get 30-day notice when I do find one. You know, Communication is the key here. Don't
Okay.
just expect both, that they're going to pay, they're going to stay. It can get ugly quickly. Okay. They talk about heat and water, make sure that you got that, all taken care of, that the tenant is doing it, if that's what the case is. But if you, the landlord, control it, that's a different story. Same with any other utilities that are involved. You got abandonment, should be deemed abandoned if they, if they have, left the premises, and, there are a lot of, this lease is very thorough. It does tell you, surrender of possessions. Yeah, you got 120 days. Now be very careful in these leases. If you read these things, the tenants have a lot of rights, okay, within the period of the lease. So to your point, Patricia, if it's post the lease, then it does become like 30 days. But Then you got damage, you got destruction, subordination of, lease estoppel, heirs and assigns. As long as there's communication between landlord, slash owner and and tenant, things will be okay. But when the landlord finds out that, Joe's living there and Joe isn't even on the lease, Latasha's on the lease, and like, what, where did Joe come from? You know, there needs to be an open line of communication, both sides here. Okay. Which is also why you don't want to be the agent. You want to be no agency if you own the building or have a ownership right in the building. Okay. Because then you could just clean, do what you got to do, get someone out. Yeah, let's go to page 5. Got acceptance of rent and after tenant breach. So these are clear. So when there's a breach of down payment, obviously, okay, and the rent will be retained for use and occupancy of the premises and shall not serve to extinguish landlord's rights or remedies relative to any lawsuit that may be fleet or in progress in the time of tenant breach. So the best thing to do is, if they don't pay, okay, but once you accept rent, okay, even if it's partial rent, you've now opened the door for essentially another, let's just say 30 days. But if it's a full 12 month and you're in month 6, you you have to show a pattern that they're not paying, and this kind of stuff, and you're not accepting. Like if the rent's 2,000 and they give you 1,200, your acceptance of it, now they are breaching the lease, yes, but your acceptance, you to be like essentially all or nothing. Okay, even if they make a promise, so if you're going to evict, if your intentions are eviction, you need to stand pat on what you're doing. The rent is $2,000. I'm not getting $2,000. Okay, start the eviction. Now you can do that. If they come in with $2,000 or $4,000 or or $6,000 for 3 months, great. But then your acceptance of that is now they're still there. Okay. So you got rules and regs here that deal with the lease. These are pretty normal. You got parking and storage. Much of this is changed. Joint and several liability, rekeying. Okay. Hey, I found there was one building we had a buyer for the new owner, which was a sale. It was like a 6 unit. Um, Half the keys didn't work. So, the only people that had keys were the actual tenants. Okay. No one seemed to have a key to the front gate. Okay. So this was a mess. Okay. My suggestion, especially if you're doing any type of sale of something like this, where it involves leases, please be very cognizant of the new buyer is entitled to the keys to each and every unit, back door, front door, whatever it is, front gate. Okay. You need to have one set of keys for the entire place, not one full set, I should say. One that gets you into unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, unit 4, unit 5, and unit 6. Okay. And a front gate if that exists, and a back gate, and the garage. You, as the landlord, have to have all of these. They can't just go rekeying things on you without your permission either. Okay. So that requires permission. So let's keep going down here. Criminal activity. So these things need to be reported by the tenant and or by other people in there. So when it comes to compensation, when you're bringing people in, okay, someone was asking about that yesterday. I don't see him on the call here. I told him to be on the call if you want to learn about this stuff. Like, when do you ask for it? Because the new law, August 17th, a couple years ago, all of these things fall under this. There needs to be a buyer broker and or a tenant broker agreement stated and in writing for any of these things. So the same rules apply. Now, it's a little different in tenancy, mainly because you don't really know. There's no contract like the 8.0 that says I will receive, X% at closing from seller, right? That's right in the contract. This lease does not have that. Okay. So that changes how you do business. So, in this sense, in the purchases, you should never be asking the seller, is your seller paying? Blah, 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 blah. That should never be a question. Write up your contract, you get your answer. Okay. When you're doing these leases, you do need to communicate and you do need to write up a separate, we have them, a separate disclosure, whatever you want to call it, essentially a payment sheet. You will pay me, or they're telling you, I will pay you, half month's rent, whatever it is. Okay. That should be discussed and then put in writing kind of ASAP. Okay. Certainly at the time of the lease, you should be getting it as a part of it, essentially. Just the way it exists on the 8.0, you should have since it doesn't exist in this contract, you need to have it in writing outside of it that states what you will be receiving as per whatever you guys talked about. You can have your own expectations, but that doesn't mean that's what's happening on the other side. Okay, so that does need to be communicated. All right, let's move on to the next page. Okay, so these are all your signatures of tenant, and all these landlord, broker information. If there's a guarantor, that needs to be in here, right now. Excuse me. All right, keep going down. Tenant broker. So here, tenant and landlord's broker information. If you are the landlord, okay, this is talking about designated agent. So if you're doing no agency, the tenant does not have a broker, right? If you're the landlord and you are representing yourself, whatever, in a building you own, you are the landlord, you are the designated agent. That should be all in here. You, Kale, address, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And on the tenant side, if they have an agent, that should be in there too, because that's who likely will be getting paid on this deal. Okay. So if it's you and no agency, you're not. So, all right, let's continue to go down a little bit. So here's where they get into all these disclosures are right in here. Okay. Which is really good. You have the bed bug thing, make sure that your tenant is reading these things so they understand what it is, okay, what they're insuring you against based on this disclosure. Preventing bed bugs. Okay, let's go down to the next one. This is, Healthy Chicago, whatever. So page 12 goes into, just talks all about bed bugs and everything and anything you ever wanted to know about bed bugs. Okay. Protecting your family from lead. So here's basically the lead disclosure that, talking about what lead does, not the actual disclosure itself, but how it protects your family from lead in your home. So you can keep going down here. Go to page 15. So are you planning to buy or rent a home before 78? That's where that's relevant to lead. Prior to 78, so the building was built in the 20s, the 30s, it does require lead-based paint addendum. If it was built 79 and forward, does not require that at all. Just the same rules apply in sales as it does in tenant, landlord, tenant. All right, keep going, please. U.S. Environmental EPA, they show where all these offices are, and all the different things you would do if you have the inkling that there's some type of lead-based paint going on. So that's page 16. Let's go to 17. Okay, lead that gets in the body in many ways. It's just all the description of this, that your health effects of lead and other things Check your family for lead. Keep going. We got recovery, repairing, and paint. Yeah. So, a lot of people, in lead-based paint, they can have lead in these homes, but unless it's spread, meaning you're chipping at it in some way with your fingers, this is how people get sick, and or, you're scraping it, then it becomes airborne. This is when lead becomes an issue. If you simply, you know, cover it with some type of surface, it's probably okay. Not probably, it is. The problem is when lead becomes, airborne. Okay. It's the same with all of this stuff. Most of these things are bad. So there could be lead in there, but where it gets bad is, kids will rub their nails on it, they'll whatever, not just kids, adults could do the same thing, whatever. So this is when this stuff gets to be a problem. So that's why when they come in there and fix these things, they have the hazmat and, they're either taking it away or whatever. And the same thing I just found out, I'm doing a house now that there's smoke in the walls, there's smoke in the carpet, there's smoke everywhere. Like the same thing would be with cat pee, that kind of stuff, any kind of smell. Okay. Even though it's not one of these like lead-based paint, but it is. If you then start once again making it airborne, that's when the smell comes back. Okay. So there's materials, same in lead-based paint and in smoke. I just found out, and or cat pee. I just put an ionizer in there. An ionizer does work, by the by. Okay, put it in there for 24, 48 hours, and then, but then you need to cover it, everything. Okay, same with lead-based paint. Let's go, keep going with this. Um, yeah, so this is everything. This is essentially, what we have that you're supposed to give your clients about lead-based paint. And then the same thing, radon guide for tenants. Okay, radon is one of those things. There's not a lot of radon in the city of Chicago. Doesn't exist in 98% of Chicago. Okay, doesn't have radon. Okay, just isn't found in Chicago per se. So I wouldn't worry so much about it on your leases and things like that because it's not a thing very often, very, very rare. More in the burbs. But it's a serious thing. It just isn't found much in Chicago. So, but you should definitely have the addendums and all that kind of stuff because they're mandatory. Okay, talks all about radon, same as any other radon disclosure that you have in a purchase. Nothing's different here. Yeah, you could just kind of go through here. Yeah, because that's the same exact, disclosure, if you will. The ABCs of radon, the testing of radon. Does everyone know what that looks like? That machine that you can keep going on down in there. There it looks like so well, this is what they do. That yeah, they go down there, but if you see a mechanism on the outside on the side of the house that goes into the basement level, that's a machine that regulates the radon. So what it does, it brings down, what I think the number now is 4.1, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, over 4. So if your test shows radon levels above 4, you are, they literally grab it out of their butts, what that number is, because it used to be different. So now it's 4. So they've decided that 4 is the number. So 4.1 decides, you will die tomorrow if it's over 4.1. That's not accurate. I'm being a bit facetious, but it's over a period of time. But what these machines do, the mechanisms, when they put in, they cost about $1,800, and they're put into homes and or wherever they need to be. They bring down the level of radon coming up from the subsoil, and you believe it or not, I just learned this: the machines themselves, that number that shows up on there, has nothing to do with the radon levels. Okay, it's what it's sucking up. You have to buy a separate machine for like 125, $130 to put on it that shows you under four. I'm at 1.8, I'm at 1.6. That number that shows on that $1,800 device doesn't show that. Okay. I did not know that. Okay. Maybe some of you did, maybe some of you didn't. I did not know that. I would assume for $2,000, you get something that actually shows you what your radon level is. But no, you only get how much it's sucking out of the ground, at what rate it's sucking, which is, that's what you're getting. You need to buy a separate mechanism, which you can buy online, that gives you that. And then it will tell you that you're under four. You better be. That's what that machine is supposed to do. So, yeah. Okay. Then we get into these Chicago rents, right? So that, by the way, that radon machine applies to either one of these leases. If it has radon, it needs to be there. Residential, and you don't need it on anything above the second level. So third level and above, you don't even need a radon thing because it's irrelevant. Radon doesn't fly in the air. It comes from the subsoil, from the ground. So the first, and or second is possible, but third, impossible. Okay. So this RLTO, this is an important notice. These are the provisions apply to all, residential units in Chicago, and they're covered by the RLTO. Okay. This is mandated, under the 2020 revisions. You got all these 30 days notice to terminate from a month to month, as we just discussed. 60 days if you have lived in your apartment for more than 6 months, but less than 3 years. So this RLTO is a mandate in the city of Chicago. 120 days. So these are your bylines. This is it right here. Okay. You cannot deviate. And that's why these leases are good. I mean, they're as good as they're going to get for the landlord. Tenants, rule, in the Chicagoland area, but they are what they are. Okay. So what rental units are covered by the ordinance? Okay. Units, that occupy with six or fewer units, units in hotels, motels, and things like that, for more than 32 continuous days. School dormitory, owner occupied or co-ops and condos, employee housing. All of these are covered, just so you know. So following provisions apply only to rental units. Okay, there's a fair housing thing. Talk about evictions, and then for a complete list, there's an RLTO ordinance. This is just parts of it. Okay. But there is, you can click on that. You can get this whole 8,000 page RLTO. Okay. Which we are constantly, this is where your dues go, by the way, when you pay dues to, to us trying to fight for you. A lot of it's got to do with this stuff. A lot of it's got to do with all the what happens in purchases, the way that a lot of it's got to do with these landlord tenant stuff, because there's so much of that. But we do good things with your money when you give it, those extra monies when you pay your dues and they ask for the money through your association. This is what keeps us making money, by the by, okay, as real estate agents. If you ever want to know a little bit more about that, get in touch with the person that's in charge of collecting that money. They will tell you all the different things that it does for you. It's association by association, but it's all through one big thing. Talks about what landlords are, have to do, for you. But utility providing the water, shut off water, electrical, gas service to the building during the occupancy, they must have it. Security deposits, prepaid rent, all of this is in here. None of this has really changed. Some LTO items have, as of January 1st, there's a couple of things, that are minor that have changed. Keep going here. They talk about security deposits. The one that's about to change is that move-in fee. It hasn't yet, but it's on the table. Something's going to change with that. Right now, a move-in fee is perfectly fine. Okay. Don't think it's not. It still is. It's okay. But I've heard talk that that's going to change shortly. Okay. So, but hang on, it hasn't. So for now, it's all good. So, it's about security deposits, prepaid rent, what's supposed to be done with it. You got to return the money and all these kind of things. All right, keep going. Da, 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 Tenant remedies, attorney fees, subleases. You could have an agreement for a sublease if that's possible. They talk about major defects. The key to all this stuff is communication and documentation. If you've got problems, you need to call your landlord, and then you need to put it in writing, and then document. You ask 5 times, they didn't fix the water leakage, blah, blah, blah. Document these things. Okay. So if you have a case or anything like that, so continue and keep going. So landlord remedies, a landlord, what happens if a tenant pays late? It gets you into this, so if they pay late, it's $10 per month under 500 plus 5% per month on the part of the rent that exceeds $500. So these are all mandated right in the RLTO. Okay. So a lot of people have these written in their own leases as well. This is what supersedes when you're talking about a Chicago lease. Okay. All right. And keep going. Yeah. So here's, they just talk about, 45. So they talk about the security deposit, interest rates. So it's technically, if you're doing a security deposit, you have to earn interest on it. Nowadays, there's a little bit more interest than there used to be, so it actually has some kind of meaning now, than it used to be. But I wouldn't, so they basically have to pay it at 0.01%, just so you know. So this is why security deposits have really become, kind of gone by the wayside in terms of really earning interest. I mean, but technically this is what you have to do, because it does earn, 0.01% of interest, if you will. So, yeah, I think this is what now it goes in a little bit of Spanish, over there. And that's basically the lease. The biggest thing that changed is that Safe Homes Act. Okay. So any other questions? I know, we had a few at the beginning here by Patricia, but anybody else have any other questions relating to this stuff? We only got about 4 more minutes here.
Okay. What do
Does
we
it?
do when it's Vernita?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Renita.
What do we do when a tenant doesn't want to leave at the end of the lease? I had a situation where one tenant was moving out and another one moving in the next day, but the previous tenant refused to leave.
Is this in Chicago?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that is a problem because eviction takes a little bit longer than you would like it to take. I mean, are they illegal? Yes. Um, um, what can you do? You could call the sheriff. This is very hard, especially in Chicago, because they're not very quick to act. I know that. Legally, you know, I guess in the middle of the winter, you're still not allowed to put their stuff out. Well, today you could, it's 50 degrees, but technically in the winter months in Chicago, you're not allowed to like put their stuff out and do all the things that would indicate, yeah, I'm kicking you out. So unfortunately, you can't necessarily take matters into your own hands because that would be illegal. All you can do is file. It is a problem. Okay. Everything is based on trust. I mean, that's the sad part because if that tenant unfortunately really wanted to stay, it's no different than a buy sell. If a seller doesn't want to sell and you're sitting there at a closing table and the seller goes, nope, I'm not selling today. What are you going to do? You're going to sue for specific performance, which is exactly what you would be doing here. Specific performance, meaning you will vacate the premises. But in landlord tenant law, and specifically in the city of Chicago, it's a while. Yeah, it's not that simple. Just follow the letter of the law and that's all you can do. And try to be. I always kill them with honey. You can't. You're never going to win by being, bitchy or an asshole. That is never going to work for you. You know, the older I've gotten, the more I've learned that, you want to get something on someone that right now is not listening to you by coming at them the wrong way. It's not going to serve you. It's just not going to work. So try, and then you make the threat, of course, hey, I've got to take this to the legal, So as of today, we have an eviction notice, so do it immediately. That's all I can tell you. Just, you can't really do it till the day of, but be prompt and do it. That's all you can do. So, yeah, not a great answer, but it's the only answer. Yeah, yeah,
Hey, Rick, can I share one thing with
yeah.
everybody?
Real quick, yeah, we got a minute.
So whenever you're using security deposit, first off, it's not advantageous to the owner. I suggest they use a move-in because if you don't pay that 1%, the tenant can sue you for a month and a half rent if you don't pay it, like I think it's by
Yep,
March or February, and you will lose because you didn't pay 10
you will lose.
cents. So
Thank you. Yeah,
just
that's accurate.
FYI, move-in fee.
Well, the
Forget
move-in
about the
fees, that's
security
why they're
deposit.
trying to get around these move-in fees, Patricia. That's what they because the people are using the move-ins to do security deposits. And so that's why they're cracking down. It's coming on the move-in
But
fee.
what you
But
do is you don't charge a whole month's rent. So if the rent is say 2,000, you only charge them 1,200 as a move-in fee. You can't charge them 2,000 because you're going to lose in
right,
court.
exactly. So yeah, you seem well vested in this. So they're going to change these rules though soon. I don't know what they're going to be. There's a lot of talk, you know, but they're going to change, and we'll roll with it as soon as it does. So, but at this point, yes, exactly what you said is the way to go. That's what I've heard as well. So, all right. Well, thank you all for being on here. I appreciate you. I
Yeah.
know someone else has their 11 o'clock slot to go on and be on the Zoom. So once again, thanks. Have a great rest of the week. And looks like well, it's not going to be as warm. It'll be warm tomorrow, but I think we're done with the winter. So
And just a
thank
heads
you.
up
You're
for
welcome
anybody
all.
that's around, 12 p.m., Rob's going to be doing a dot loop 101. So if you want to come back at 12 o'clock, we'll
Thank you.
be. Thank you guys. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Rick.
Thanks.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Good
Bye
Have a
now.
session.
great day. See you later.